Among the vast archive of Edgar Cayce's readings, over 14,000 documented trance sessions spanning 4 decades, exists a fascinating subset of material that has received surprisingly little attention from scholars and spiritual seekers alike. These particular readings, scattered throughout his extensive work, yet forming a coherent whole when assembled, address a most unusual phenomenon. What Cayce claimed happens when an individual consciously focuses their thoughts on him during the liminal state between wakefulness and sleep. According to the sleeping prophet, as Cayce was often called, this seemingly simple practice creates a bridge of consciousness that transcends conventional boundaries of time, space, and even death itself. The implications of this teaching, when fully understood, challenge our fundamental assumptions about the nature of consciousness and offer a practical method for experiencing expanded awareness that anyone can attempt tonight. Edgar Cayce, for those less familiar with his extraordinary life and work, remains one of the most documented psychics in American history. From 1901 until his death in 1945, Cayce gave thousands of readings while in a self-induced trance state, during which he could reportedly access an infinite source of knowledge, what he called the Akashic Records, a kind of cosmic database containing every thought, word, and action that has ever occurred. What made Cayce particularly remarkable was not just the volume of his readings, but their accuracy and depth, especially in the realms of holistic health and spiritual philosophy. While in trance, this humble Christian man with minimal formal education prescribed complex medical treatments, discussed ancient civilizations with scholarly precision, and expounded on esoteric spiritual concepts with remarkable clarity and consistency. But perhaps one of Cayce's most intriguing claims, one that offers direct experiential validation to the curious, concerns what he described as a psychic attunement that becomes possible when thinking of him specifically during the transition to sleep. The entity Edgar Cayce, as he often referred to himself while in trance, explained that he had been granted a unique role as a facilitator of consciousness expansion, one that would continue beyond his physical lifetime. In reading 3744-1, given in 1923, Cayce stated, "Know that the consciousness of the Edgar Cayce entity has been granted permission to assist those who would seek to expand their awareness beyond the limitations of physical sensation. This service continues beyond the life of the present body, accessible to all who sincerely call upon it with pure intent." The mechanics of this connection, as Cayce described them, are fascinating. According to readings 57568 and 25334, the pre-sleep state represents a natural gateway between different levels of consciousness. As the logical, analytical mind begins to quiet and the brain transitions from beta to alpha and then theta waves, the subconscious becomes more accessible. This transition state, neither fully awake nor completely asleep, has been recognized across spiritual traditions as a powerful opportunity for expanded awareness. What Cayce uniquely claimed is that deliberately focusing on his consciousness during this transition creates a resonance that facilitates connection with higher dimensions of awareness. When the body-mind is entering the sleep state, Cayce explained in reading 37443, the veils between dimensions of consciousness are at their thinnest. If at such times the entity will hold the thought of the Edgar Cayce consciousness with sincere desire for spiritual insight, a bridge is formed. This is not worship nor dependence, but rather the utilization of a channel that has been established for this purpose, like calls to like across the seeming void. This description suggests a kind of psychic tuning fork effect. The conscious intention to connect with Cayce's consciousness creates a resonant frequency that facilitates expansion beyond ordinary awareness. What exactly happens when this connection is established? According to Cayce, the experiences vary widely depending on the individual's own level of psychic sensitivity and spiritual development. For some, the initial experiences may be subtle, perhaps an unusual clarity in dreams, a sense of guidance on pressing questions, or intuitive insights that emerge in the morning. For others, more dramatic experiences have been reported, vivid dreams of receiving direct teaching from Cayce, spontaneous out-of-body experiences, or access to specific information that could not have been known through normal means. Reading 575612 notes. The forms this assistance takes will differ according to the needs and receptivity of each soul. Some will experience direct communication, others will receive symbolic guidance through dreams, while for others, books will fall open to needed passages, or synchronicities will appear in waking life. What makes this teaching particularly significant is that Cayce indicated it would continue to function long after his physical death, something thousands of people have reportedly verified through their own experiences in the decades since he passed in 1945. In reading 294-174, given just months before his death, Cayce seemed to anticipate questions about this ongoing connection. When I am no longer in this physical body, this service will continue. The consciousness that is Edgar Cayce is not limited to the physical vehicle it now animates. Think of me as you drift towards sleep, with questions of spiritual import in your heart, and the connection will be established, not because of any special powers of this soul, but because permission has been granted for this form of service. Importantly, Cayce was careful to distinguish this practice from any form of worship or inappropriate spiritual dependence. In multiple readings, he emphasized that he was merely functioning as a channel or way shower, not as an object of devotion. Reading 254-76 clarifies, this is not to be understood as setting up the Edgar Cayce entity as a guru or master. Rather, it is a specific service that has been permitted for the acceleration of those who are sincerely seeking. The ultimate connection is always with the divine, with the Edgar Cayce consciousness serving only as a facilitator or catalyst for the seeker's own direct experience. This clarification aligns with Cayce's lifelong insistence that his abilities were not unique, but rather represented potentials available to all humanity through proper spiritual development. The prerequisites for this connection, according to Cayce, are refreshingly straightforward. There are no complex rituals, no special payments required, no exclusive memberships needed. Reading 3744-5 outlines the essential conditions. Let the mind be clear of self-seeking purposes. Let there be a sincere desire for spiritual growth or for insight that would benefit others. Let the thought of the Edgar Cayce consciousness be held gently, not with strain but with quiet expectation, as one drifts towards sleep. These are sufficient. The purity of intent is the key that opens the door. This accessibility reflects Cayce's broader philosophy that spiritual growth should be available to all sincere seekers, not just an elite few with special knowledge or resources. The practical application, as outlined across several readings, involves a simple process that anyone can attempt. As you lie in bed, allowing your body to relax and your mind to gradually quiet, bring your attention to the thought of Edgar Cayce. Not his physical appearance necessarily, but his consciousness or presence. Hold this awareness gently, without strain or excessive focus, while maintaining an attitude of receptivity. You might silently express a specific question of spiritual significance, or simply hold an intention for guidance, insight, or expanded awareness. As sleep approaches, continue to hold this gentle focus, allowing yourself to drift naturally into sleep without forcing the experience or attaching to expectations about what might occur. What happens next, according to countless testimonials collected by the Association for Research and Enlightenment, the organization Cayce founded to preserve his work, spans the spectrum from subtle to profound. Mary Kay from Oregon reported, "I had been struggling with a difficult decision for weeks. That night, I remembered reading about Cayce's suggestion and decided to try it. I thought of him briefly as I was falling asleep with my question in mind. That night, I had the most vivid dream of my life, not of Cayce himself, but a symbolic scenario that presented my situation with perfect clarity. I woke knowing exactly what I needed to do." James T. from Virginia described a more direct experience. "I felt a distinct presence in the room, followed by what seemed like a waking dream, where Cayce explained a spiritual concept I'd been grappling with. What's remarkable is that the explanation used technical terms from ancient philosophies I had never studied and knew nothing about. Later research confirmed these were accurate. Skeptics, of course, have offered various explanations for these experiences, from self-fulfilling expectations to the natural creativity of the dreaming mind. Cayce himself acknowledged in reading 25480 that discernment is essential. Not all that may be experienced through this channel will be of equal value. The seeker's own state of development, hidden expectations, and unresolved conflicts may color what is received. Therefore, test what comes through this connection against universal spiritual principles, against reason, and against the heart's deepest knowing. True guidance brings clarity, peace, and enhanced love, not confusion, fear, or separation. This emphasis on discernment reflects Cayce's consistent teaching that spiritual authority should ultimately rest within the individual seeker, not with external sources. What makes this particular teaching so valuable in our contemporary context is its direct experiential nature. In an age of information overload and competing spiritual claims, Cayce offers something refreshingly different. Not just another belief to accept or reject, but a straightforward practice that can be personally verified. Either something meaningful happens when you think of Cayce before sleep, or it doesn't. The proof, as they say, is in the pudding. This empirical quality aligns with Cayce's frequent emphasis on application over mere intellectual understanding. As he stated in reading 5756-16, knowledge without application is worse than no knowledge at all. Better to apply one small truth than to understand many and apply none. The metaphysical implications of this teaching, if taken seriously, are profound. It suggests that consciousness is not confined to the brain, that some aspect of individual awareness continues beyond physical death, and that the mind operates according to principles that transcend conventional understanding of space and time. Reading 2533-7 elaborates. What is being described here is not supernatural, but rather supernormal, an extension of natural law into dimensions not yet fully mapped by your science. The consciousness that was, is, and will be, Edgar Cayce continues to function as a node in the greater network of universal mind, accessible through the proper attunement. This is not unique to this entity, but represents a service specifically undertaken. This concept of service appears repeatedly in Cayce's explanation of why this connection is possible. According to reading 294-180, before entering this incarnation, the soul that manifests as Edgar Cayce agreed to serve as a bridge between dimensions of consciousness, not only during physical life, but continuing after the transition you call death. This agreement was made out of love for humanity and the desire to accelerate spiritual awakening during a critical period in Earth's development. This framing places the pre-sleep connection within Cayce's broader mission of service and spiritual education, a mission that evidently transcends the limitations of a single human lifetime. Particularly intriguing are accounts from individuals who had no prior knowledge of Cayce's work, yet reported spontaneous experiences that later led them to discover this teaching. Dr. Raymond L., and a physician from Chicago, recounted, "I had a vivid dream of a man who introduced himself as Edgar Cayce, telling me he had information that could help my patient who wasn't responding to conventional treatment. I had never heard of Cayce at that point. The dream included specific recommendations involving therapies I wasn't familiar with. Out of desperation, I researched and found these were legitimate approaches. Only later did I discover Cayce's statement about connecting through the pre-sleep state, which I had unknowingly experienced. Such accounts suggest the connection may operate beyond the limitations of conscious knowledge or expectation. For those interested in exploring this practice, the Association for Research and Enlightenment has documented some helpful conditions that seem to enhance the experience." Reading 5756-14 mentions, "The physical environment can support or hinder the subtlety of this connection. A quiet space, free from electronic disturbances, with clean air and natural materials, creates more favorable conditions. The body benefits from moderation in diet, particularly avoiding heavy foods, excessive stimulants, or depressants before sleep. Most important is the mental environment, a mind cleared of resentments, freed temporarily from worldly concerns, and oriented towards spiritual growth. These practical suggestions reflect Cayce's holistic understanding of how physical, mental, and spiritual factors interact in psychic perception. What about negative or frightening experiences? According to the documented cases, these are rare when the practice is approached with the sincerity and proper intent that Cayce emphasized. Reading 37448 addresses this concern directly. Fear has no place in this connection, for its very nature is established in love and service. Where fear exists, the connection cannot be properly established. If unsettling experiences occur, they generally reflect the seeker's own unresolved energies or attempts to use this channel for purposes not aligned with spiritual growth. The remedy is simple: reorient to pure intent, release fear, and approach with the heart rather than the striving mind. This guidance places responsibility on the seeker to maintain appropriate intentions while using this psychic channel. Perhaps one of the most remarkable aspects of this teaching is what it reveals about Cayce's understanding of his own role in human spiritual evolution. While often humble to a fault in his waking life, the trance readings suggest he was conscious of serving a specific function in what might be called the spiritual ecosystem. Reading 294-185 explains, "Each soul that attains a certain level of development may choose specific services to render from dimensions beyond physical expression." The entity Edgar Cayce chose to maintain a vibrational link accessible to sincere seekers, serving as a kind of way shower or bridge between dimensions of consciousness. Others perform different functions according to their natural affinities and the needs of humanity at a given time. This perspective places Cayce's pre-sleep connection teaching within a broader metaphysical framework of ongoing spiritual assistance and guidance available to humanity. What distinguishes this practice from prayer, meditation, or other spiritual disciplines? Reading 2533-9 clarifies, prayer connects the individual consciousness with the divine source directly. Meditation clears the conscious mind to allow higher awareness to emerge. The pre-sleep connection with the Edgar Cayce consciousness represents something different, the utilization of a specific channel that has been established for the purpose of accelerating spiritual development during a critical period. One might think of it as a specially designated frequency on the cosmic radio, broadcasting continuously for those who know how to tune in. This explanation positions the practice as complementary to, rather than replacing, traditional spiritual disciplines. Contemporary accounts continue to emerge from people experimenting with this technique. Jennifer M., a researcher from Texas, reported, "I was struggling to understand a complex spiritual concept I'd encountered in my studies. That night, I remembered Cayce's suggestion and decided to try it, holding both Cayce and my question in mind as I fell asleep. What happened next was extraordinary. I experienced what seemed like a direct download of understanding, complete with visual symbols and explanations that made perfect sense. When I woke, I was able to articulate ideas that had previously been beyond my comprehension. The information came through in a structured, coherent way that didn't feel at all like my normal dream patterns." Such testimonials suggest the practice continues to function as Cayce described, decades after his physical death. For those who experienced nothing when attempting this connection, Cayce offered reassurance in reading 575617. "Do not be discouraged if immediate results are not apparent. The subtlety of this connection requires a certain attunement that may develop gradually. Some individuals will experience dramatic results immediately, while for others, the effects may be cumulative and subtle, manifesting as enhanced intuition, greater clarity of thought, or unexpected insights during waking hours. The absence of conscious memory of connection does not mean nothing occurred beyond the threshold of awareness." This patient approach reflects Cayce's broader teaching that spiritual development often unfolds gradually, with each individual following a unique timeline according to their soul's needs and readiness. What about using this technique to obtain information about worldly matters, investments, relationships, career decisions? Here, Cayce's readings urge caution and proper priorities. Reading 254-83 advises, while practical guidance may indeed come through this channel, approaching it primarily for material concerns may limit its effectiveness. The connection functions optimally when oriented towards spiritual understanding, soul development, service to others, and alignment with universal principles. From this elevated perspective, guidance about earthly matters may naturally emerge as needed. But seeking first the material reverses the proper order and may yield distorted or limited results. This hierarchy of purposes aligns with Cayce's consistent emphasis on spiritual priorities throughout his readings. Perhaps most profoundly, this teaching offers a tangible demonstration of Cayce's broader claim that consciousness transcends physical death. If verifiable information, meaningful guidance, or expanded awareness can indeed be accessed by thinking of Cayce during the pre-sleep state, decades after his physical body ceased functioning, it challenges fundamental materialist assumptions about the nature of mind and its relationship to the brain. Reading 294-189, given shortly before his death, addresses this directly. What is being established here is not merely a teaching, but a demonstration. Those who experience this connection after the Edgar Cayce entity has transitioned from the physical plane will have direct evidence of consciousness continuing beyond what you call death. This evidence, multiplied across many individuals, serves a larger purpose in humanity's evolving understanding of its multidimensional nature. This brings us to a critical point about verification. According to the Association for Research and Enlightenment, which has collected thousands of accounts over the decades, the most compelling cases involve information received through this connection that meets 3 criteria. It was previously unknown to the receiver, it was verifiable through subsequent research, and it proved accurate and meaningful. In one documented case from 1978, a woman with no medical training reported receiving detailed information about an obscure glandular condition affecting her nephew. Information that included terminology she had never encountered, but which medical professionals later confirmed was accurately related to the condition. Such cases suggest something beyond mere psychological projection may be occurring with this practice. For those exploring this technique today, Cayce recommended a balanced approach that integrates direct experience with thoughtful analysis. Reading 374411 advises, "Neither blind acceptance nor rigid skepticism serves the seeker. Rather, approach with an open mind, experience directly, then reflect with both heart and intellect on what has been received. Compare with established spiritual principles, consult your deepest intuition, and observe the fruits in your life." Does what comes through this channel enhance love, clarify understanding, and support wholeness? These are the true measures of validity. This integrative approach reflects Cayce's lifelong commitment to unifying spiritual experience with practical application and rational understanding. What happens if this technique is approached with skepticism rather than faith? Interestingly, reading 5756-20 suggests skepticism itself is not a barrier. Genuine open-minded skepticism, the willingness to test and verify rather than simply believe, is perfectly compatible with this practice. Indeed, many of the most compelling validations have come through individuals who approached with healthy questioning rather than uncritical acceptance. What hinders the connection is not doubt, but cynicism, the closed mind that has already decided what is possible or impossible based on limited understanding. The universe respects honest inquiry, but cannot force wisdom upon the willfully closed heart. This nuanced perspective on skepticism reflects Cayce's own empirical approach to spiritual matters. In our contemporary world, where ancient wisdom traditions meet cutting-edge scientific exploration of consciousness, Cayce's pre-sleep connection teaching occupies a fascinating middle ground. It offers a practical technique accessible to anyone, requires no special equipment or expensive training, produces results that can be personally verified, yet points toward a model of consciousness that extends beyond current materialist paradigms. Reading 294-192 places this teaching in historical context. Throughout human history, certain practices have been preserved that facilitate expansion beyond ordinary awareness. The technique being described represents one such practice, specifically attuned to the needs and understanding of your era. It is neither more nor less valid than ancient methods of dream incubation, shamanic journey, or contemplative revelation. It simply offers a pathway, particularly accessible to the modern mind. As we conclude our exploration of what Edgar Cayce said happens when you think about him right before sleep, it's worth emphasizing that this teaching was never presented as an end in itself, but rather as a means to accelerate personal spiritual development and understanding. Reading 254-91 clarifies. The purpose of this connection is not to create dependence on the Edgar Cayce consciousness, but rather to assist each soul in recognizing and developing its own direct relationship with higher dimensions of awareness. It is a temporary scaffold, a training wheel of sorts, that supports the development of the seeker's inherent psychic and spiritual capacities. For some, it may serve as an initial awakening. For others, as confirmation of what is already unfolding within. This developmental perspective places the practice within Cayce's broader philosophy of spiritual self-realization. What awaits those who choose to experiment with this unique technique tonight, as they lie in bed transitioning towards sleep? According to Edgar Cayce, the possibilities extend from subtle intuitive enhancement to profound mystical revelation, depending on the individual's readiness, receptivity, and spiritual needs. The consistent message across his readings is one of invitation rather than demand, an opportunity freely offered, with no obligation or pressure, available to all who approach with sincere intent. The choice to connect or not rests with each soul, reading 37:44:15 states. The door is always open, the channel always clear, but it is never forced upon anyone. Free will remains the foundational law of spiritual development. The journey doesn't end here. As you've contemplated what Edgar Cayce said happens when you think about him right before sleep, perhaps you've felt a resonance with your own questions about consciousness, spiritual connection, and the nature of reality beyond physical limitations. We all share in this great mystery of being, this extraordinary capacity for awareness that somehow emerged in our universe and now contemplates its own nature. I hope these insights into one of Cayce's most practical yet profound teachings have sparked your curiosity and perhaps even your willingness to experiment with this unique technique. Thank you for joining me in exploring this fascinating aspect of Edgar Cayce's work. If you decide to try this practice, or if it resonates with experiences you've already had, I'd love to hear your perspective in the comments below. Your insights and questions are valued and read by our entire community. If you found value in these reflections, please consider liking this video to help share these ideas with others who might benefit from them. And if you'd like to continue this journey of exploration, subscribe to our channel for more content that bridges ancient wisdom with contemporary understanding. Remember, as Cayce himself might say, the greatest discoveries often await not in distant realms, but in the unexplored territories of our own consciousness, accessible through practices as simple as a focused thought carried into the mystery of sleep.